I like to challenge my colleagues by asking them how much time are they spending looking outside of their own specialty for solutions that could potentially help their clients, their patients. Look, it's hard enough to stay up to date within our own specialty, let alone other specialties. And then, of course, everything outside of what traditional medicine. But our patients are looking for that. And they're going elsewhere for those solutions that could, in fact, be hindering your treatment strategies or perhaps even supplementing or enhancing them. But are you aware of that? And so, part of the doctor's guide, as well as the masterclass fuel, I bring to you insights and of technologies, resources, and solutions that you could potentially implement in your own practice to support your patient needs, but also to give fuel to your own practice. And so join me in these interviews with these different technologies and products and resources that I bring to you as curated products that I believe will benefit you, your practice, and your patients as well. So I'm Dr. Bart Rademacher. This is Prescription for Your Transformation, real people, real conversations, and real success. And once again, bringing to you the insights that you're going to want to have so that you can start making those shifts that you knew you had to make, but just didn't know how. The truth is that there's a lot that we don't know, and there's a lot outside of our awareness. But if you're a seeker like myself, it's finding those incredible human beings that have done so much for our country and for others that oftentimes, are the leaders and the light for us to move forward in our own lives. And I'm very privileged, to be talking to a Navy SEAL, someone who's dedicated, his life to protecting our freedoms and doing the stuff that, we're too scared or just simply unable to do. And listening to his journey is something that we all should take time and pause so that we can show them the respect that they deserve for the work that they've done for us. And in addition to that, is that opportunity for us to welcome them back into normal society, which sometimes isn't as easy as we might think it is. I mean, just living our normal lives is hard enough, right? And so, also, appreciating, what they can also do for us, once they've left their military service. So, John, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Dr. Rademacher, thank you for inviting me on your show. It's an honor. I'm very happy to be here.
No, and thank you. And it's a privilege for all of us that we have people like yourselves that really take care of the things that we have no concept of. And again, it's that freedom that we get to enjoy because of people like you. But let's dive in. This is just going to be an organic, fireside chat between two guys, and what your journey is, and what are some of the learnings that you've received over the years that we could potentially benefit from.
Okay. Well, I live in St. Petersburg, Florida. Married, 3 kids, Sean, Ryan, and Meg. 19, 17, 14. We rehearsed that beforehand so I'd get the ages right. I grew up in Northern California. Mom, dad, sister, they all live in California still. I went to school at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. I did an inter-service transfer out of the Air Force Academy with the purpose of going into the Navy to go into the SEAL teams. I didn't get into the teams initially. It took me about 6 or 7 submissions to try and get in. I was a hard hat diver while I was waiting to go to BUDS, to go to basic underwater demolition school. So I slowly moved my way through the officer ranks. If you go to a service academy, you graduate as an officer. So I was in the Navy. I was an ensign in the Navy. I went to a salvage boat. Then I became a lieutenant JG, became a lieutenant. Finally, after 7 submissions, 3 years, I got into BUDS and graduated from basic underwater demolition SEAL school in 1996. For the next 21 years, I served in the SEAL teams. So Bosnia, Kosovo, we were in Kosovo when 9/11 happened. And then you can imagine after 9/11, everything for all of us changed, of course. And my last job in the teams was at our headquarters, which is at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida. So right across the bay from us here in St. Petersburg. And I worked in a program called the POTIF. Everything in the military's acronym. So preservation of the force and family. That's where I worked. I was the director of the POTIF program as a Navy 06, as a captain. And part of the POTIF program was dealing with we had a human performance program throughout the SOCOM enterprise. So when I say SOCOM, that is the Special Operations Command. We'll do a little military 101.
Right. Yeah.
So Special Operations Command is made up of all the services. So you got Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. Every service has a special operations component. So in the Navy, that component is called Naval Special Warfare. And that's made up of the SEAL teams. That's made up of our boat teams that drive the SEALs around. SEAL Team 6 is part of that. That's all Naval Special Warfare. And each service has its own type of thing. So in the Army, you got your Rangers, your Green Berets, your Special Forces guys. And then you have your National Mission Force for each of the services. And all of that falls under the SOCOM headquarters, which is right across the bay on the peninsula there at MacDill Air Force Base. SOCOM headquarters is a 4-star command. And that was my big last staff tour, not an operational tour, but a staff tour. And that's where I retired out of, but that's where I got introduced to Kaatsu.
Great. So one of the things that you were sharing with me that, is the unique experiences that you had as well, insofar as, working with small units and the relevance of that, in the real world, right? Where what I see then happening is that, oftentimes we think that we're on our own and we don't have the support and achieving things becomes a lot harder. And then otherwise, if you're part of a larger organization, then that kind of slows things down because there's so much bureaucracy. So the middle range is what you've experienced that is highly effective. But what was it about having these small teams that make it so much more effective? And how is it that perhaps, regular people like myself or small businesses, could relate to that?
I think a good way to answer that question is how I ended up in a small business, essentially a startup, versus a large organization. At the beginning, when I was transitioning out of the military, out of the headquarters there, I was thinking big government contract organizations. I was looking at executive leadership positions in Starbucks and Amazon and a lot of these big conglomerate organizations. And I was actually being pursued for an executive recruiting job for Amazon. And so they flew me out there to Seattle and I was looking around. I was like, oh my God, this thing is just massive, what they're undertaking. And but it was a little unnerving as well, because yes, special operations is a niche part of the military, but you're still part of the military.
Right.
So you're part of a massive bureaucracy. And the more I looked around at these large organizations, I think the more I realized I don't I don't want to go from one chapter in life into another chapter that is under a giant bureaucratic load like that. So I started thinking about smaller organizations, and a friend of mine pulled me aside for coffee one day. He said, "Hey, the beauty of a startup or a small organization, when you're changing chapters like this, and you have a lot of leadership experience, you've done all this stuff in the military or anywhere really, the beauty of this model is when you come into a startup, and Kaatsu at the time was basically a startup in the US. It was a known entity in Japan, and we can talk about that. But in the US, it was a startup. And what he said was, think of it this way: you go to this small company, and in a year, the company completely tanks and you're let go. You are actually now more valuable to the marketplace. You might see it as a fail, but you as a military guy go there, you learn, it's a small company, so you're involved with everything. You're learning. And now you go to someone else and say, hey, I'm not only a retired military guy from SEAL teams, but I was the chief, whatever, business development guy, and I helped with research development and marketing and advert. So all that stuff. And then he said, and you can play that game over and over and over and gradually become more and more valuable to the marketplace. And when I heard that, it kind of took away, because as a military guy, life is very predictable. Every 2 weeks, you get a paycheck. Your medical for your family is 100% covered. You never have to think about that stuff. And going into a startup always scared me. But when you think of the way he laid it out, and as a retired military guy, your medical's taken care of, and you get a little pension, kind of stipend, I'll call it. So I was okay with it. And it just happened that I had been exposed to Kaatsu and had fallen in love with it. And that's a whole nother story, how we got there. But yeah, I think being in the SEAL teams taught me that a small community of like-minded individuals can really achieve a lot. And I think the goal for a lot of guys, especially transitioning military guys, is to find a team that has kind of like-minded mission focus, I guess you could say. And if you can find that, it becomes kind of like a pace, not an issue. If you can find a small group of people that want to chase after the same mission, that's awesome, especially when it's small, if you can find that.
Again, it really comes down to, having a strategy that you can understand. And, Ray Dalio has a similar kind of philosophy as what you just shared. And he talks about the post-failure high. And so for him, it's sort of like failure is his friend. And so you do something, it tanks, and then you learn, and then you grow, and then he gets all excited because then he goes up again. And it's constantly like that. That's life, right? And somebody who never fails probably never really succeeds, because that's not a normal, path to success, right? And I think at one point, I don't know if the statistic is any different today, but it's almost like the rite of passage is a bankruptcy, and with most successful entrepreneurs, they fail on average 11 times before they get the real, windfall. And so yeah, I mean, clearly you had a strategy that was helpful. And I think what happens oftentimes, people don't have that understanding, and then they're kind of freaking out. Okay, what kind of environment can I find my own safety? And so love that you joined Kaatsu. So let's talk about Kaatsu.
Okay.
What is Kaatsu, and how did you get involved? And then after that, we'll talk about the whole science behind Kaatsu and its health benefits, because that's really what I want to find out today and share today, is the incredible benefits of Kaatsu.
Okay. All right. Well, in a nutshell, Kaatsu is elastic pneumatic bands that you put on either your upper arms or your upper legs. You connect to a small device, and this device has algorithms in it that will bring those, they're pneumatic air bladders that are in these bands. And what happens is you connect the bands to the device, and it inflates the bladders in these bands to a specific pressure, holds it for 30 seconds, and then totally releases the pressure for a short period of time, 5 seconds, and then a little more pressure for 30 seconds, release it for 5, a little more pressure for 30 seconds, and release it for 5. So the word Kaatsu means ka is increase, atsu is pressure. Think shiatsu, right? It's pressure. And Kaatsu is it's really 2 words when you talk about the pressure on and the pressure off. It's Kaatsu, and jiatsu. Jia is a release.
Okay.
Kaatsu, jiatsu, too long, mouthful. Dr. Sato in Tokyo, the founder, said, Kaatsu. So that's where the name comes from. But it's important that when we talk about what this device does, that we talk about the release of the pressure. Because what happens is when the bands inflate, all that tissue that's distal of the bands engorges with blood, or I like to think of it as stretching open for 30 seconds, all the way down to your capillaries. During that 30-second stretch open, you're slowing oxygenated blood, slowing down around whatever wound or whatever injury that you're dealing with. So think of a pitcher dealing with Tommy John surgery, coming out of Tommy John's, right? They'll put the bands on just the affected arm. You can do both at once, but on the Tommy John surgery, you put the bands on, and during the pressure phase, new blood is slowed down. They're not tourniquets. We're always going to have blood flow, but we're slowing the blood down around the wound or around the acute injury for 30 seconds, letting that oxygenated blood do its thing. So you take this band that is, again, it's elastic, it stretches. So when you move the limb, the band will actually move with the limb, but you're creating a nice bed of air inside on the limb. So as the band inflates with air, you're slowing all that venous return, you're slowing all that blood flow down, you're engorging all that tissue, you're getting you're dilating all that tissue that's distal of the band. Any kind of multi-joint movement that you do when you're in an engorged or dilated state like that, with especially all that venous tissue, your brain interprets that as a different kind of metabolic stress, as if you didn't have the band on. And it actually will feel, you'll get a burn, you'll get a lactate response when you start doing movements. If I had the bands on right now and I was doing this, after about 10 of these, I'm going to start to feel the burn all through my triceps, biceps, and my wrist, anything that I'm using during the pressure phase. But the release is key, because if, let's say, you're rehabbing an injury, or you're trying to get a wound to heal a little faster, every time the bands release, you have new oxygenated blood coming in. Then the bands inflate again. You slow this new oxygenated blood around whatever it is that your body deems needs to be fixed. And now you have a higher partial pressure of oxygenated blood around the wound, or around the sutures, or around the broken bone, or even connective tissue that has very little blood flow. It still has blood flow. So the more of those cycles you do, the better it is for the wound to heal, whatever it is. But now let's take one step further. Let's say you don't have a wound, right? All that dilating and relaxing of that tissue, every time you do that, you're creating a shearing force inside the vessels along the endothelial walls. And that causes the release of endothelial nitric oxide, which is a very powerful systemic effect for vascular elasticity to help your, and now we get into the systemic effect. You have these things on your arms, you say, let's say, and you're just doing, let's say you're doing emails or you're doing dishes while you're doing those cycles, and you start to get a little bit of that burn. Your mind thinks that you're working much harder than you are. You're going to get a hormonal response to intense exercise, even though you're not doing intense exercise. Your body just is naturally going to realize when all this stuff is released, well, if it's not needed here, where's it needed? And then you get this systemic response. So I'm the perfect example of this. When they were doing my last rehab at SOCOM, it was for a torn rotator cuff. And my back has been screwed up for over 20 years. When I broke it in 1999, I had a parachute accident where I broke the facet joints and my L5 slid off my S1. So I've always had back pain. But what I found is when they started doing my rehab for this shoulder with Kaatsu, other aches and pains started to get better. Not perfect, but everything started to feel better. So there's definitely a systemic response. All kinds of other things that researchers are looking at with this on the diabetes side and A1C levels. We have the Olympic Committee looking at bringing athletes out of flight dysrhythmia faster, jet lag, for some reason, and I don't know exactly why. I don't know if anyone knows why. But when you do this close to bedtime and you have sleep trackers on guys, especially when you're doing the upper body ones, and you don't exercise before bed, but you do maybe some light neck rolls or shoulder rolls or just light stretching upstairs here. The researchers out of Brighton, these studies that they've initiated with athletes, these are with elite athletes, they see the stage 3 and stage 4 sleep sliding to the left. They see the guys getting into that parasympathetic state a little bit faster.
Oh, wow.
Which is super interesting to me because the world I came from, I mean, your whole freaking life is flight dysrhythmia. I mean, because you're on the road, you're flying all the time, right? Multiple time zones. So anything that you can do to help guys get into the appropriate circadian rhythm faster is big value on the military side, and of course on the athlete side. I'll keep talking if you want. I'll talk for 4 hours.
So no, absolutely. So I'm in awe right now. And so, what about cardiac? Are you familiar with the influence it has on the cardiac function?
Yeah. So I need to emphasize again that I am a retired knuckle dragger. I'm not a physician. I'm not. I don't have your background. But what I do know is where Dr. Sato really cut his teeth with this stuff was during a 10-year-long cardiac rehab study that was done at University of Tokyo Hospital. It's kind of like Japan's Harvard Medical School. Very, very high end. The cardiologist who I've come to know, Dr. Nakajima, former cardiologist to the Emperor of Japan, he helped start a 10-year-long study with Dr. Sato, an N of 7,000 patients. And if you think about somebody, let's just say a guy gets a stent put in, what Dr. Nakajima used Kaatsu for was the next morning, they would put the leg bands on and do very, very light cycles, but they would do a cycle of pressure. I think he held it longer than 30 seconds. I think it was more in the 1 to 2 minute range. But the idea being during these slight increases in pressure, Um, you're forcing the heart, you're forcing that perfusion effect. You're
Right.
forcing the heart to pump, not faster, but pump a little bit harder. And that's why, Bart, when you put these on and you're at the house and you're just doing household chores, or even if you're just laying down watching TV, you'll feel heat. You'll feel the heat coming on, because especially when you have the leg bands on, because your legs have so much muscle and tissue. During the pressure phase, your heart is just going to start pumping harder,
Right.
and you're going to feel that exercise. You're kind of
So
exercising
each
inside out.
session is typically how long? Is it a couple of minutes or?
There's, if all you're doing is Kaatsu cycles, you can do, I hesitate to say it like this because I know some people go crazy, but you can do as many cycles as you want, because you're getting that release every 30 seconds.
Right.
You do as many as you want. Now, you as a new user, do we want you to go wear Kaatsu 4 hours tomorrow? I mean, no, of course not. But if you're not doing exercise and you're just using it, traditional exercise, if you're just using it around the house, folding towels, doing dishes, that kind of stuff, you will definitely feel like you're working much harder than you think you are. But you're in the cycle mode. Now there is a constant mode. So that's always the last thing I talk about with Kaatsu, because the key is the release.
Right.
However, there's plenty of competitors out there, and they are all constant pressure devices. Everything from a manual, just you do it yourself, to a bulb pump type thing. There's even guys out there that are using repurposed, and this is crazy to me, but using repurposed surgical tourniquets, which is much wider and rigid. It doesn't give it all, completely covers the muscle body. Super uncomfortable. Totally do not recommend that for anyone, but that's a whole nother topic. But there's plenty of competitors that do this constant pressure mode. Now you can do that with Kaatsu, and it is safe because the bands do give and move with the limb. But when you're doing constant pressure, we don't recommend any more than 10 minutes. And you have a device, you'll see what I mean. You can experiment with it. Do a couple cycles, then put it on constant pressure and do some very simple, maybe hand clenches combined with some bicep curls. You don't even need any weight. You'll feel it very quickly.
But let's say
I would say 10 minutes in that mode. Yeah.
So let's say, for example, we have a medical doctor that has this at the office and he's offering this, to his clients. What is typically a session, for someone like that to come in to utilize this device? Because part of the idea of what it is I'm wanting to achieve is giving doctors tools and resources that they can augment the health of the patients, not just with some lifestyle, nutritional changes, but some other devices like Kaatsu. So how would a PT business or doctor's office utilize this?
Well, there's two ways the PTs use these smaller portable devices. One way they use it is inside the actual clinic during the warm up. 9 times out of 10, the patient is given a warm up, and they kind of know what to do. Whether it's an arm bicycle, or if you're on doing something for your legs, or a stationary bike or whatnot.
Right.
That is a scenario where they can slap Kaatsu on the client or the patient right there and leave them to their own devices for 10 to 15 minutes. But what you'll find is you get warmed up much faster when you're using Kaatsu, so you actually can slow down that warm up piece. That's one way they use it. And then the other way they use these portable devices, because we do have a clinical device that sits on a table on wheels and gets moved around the clinic. But a lot of them like the portability aspect, because then let's just take me, for example, I had to do, certain exercises with TheraBands. The guys at SOCCENT, the PTs, it's Special Operations Command Central. Sorry, I'm still in acronym mode. But they would put the portable device on me and use it as an adjunct to the existing movements that I already had to do anyway.
Right.
So instead of doing this movement with a 10-pound resistance, they put me at maybe a 2 to 3 pound resistance wearing Kaatsu in that cycle mode. So they can put it on patients and let patients exercise or do their rehab while they're wearing it. If I go to a PT, that's usually a 45-minute session. Does Kaatsu need to be on for the whole time? Absolutely not. Can it be on for the whole time? Right. Absolutely. It just depends on the therapist and how they want to play it. So there is an in-clinic perspective, and then there's some clinics have enough devices that they check them out to certain patients to take home. Right. Because there is a passive aspect to this. If the more of these pressure on and pressure offs you do, the better it is for cardiac and vascular health. So it kind of depends what it is the therapist is working with the patient on. But oftentimes, if they feel passive use will help the patient, they'll let them check it out and take it home. And then 3 days later, when they come back in, check it back in.
So kind of putting in context, if somebody has a open heart surgery or just a stent for that matter, I mean, how long after, that procedure would you recommend using Kaatsu in the event that they don't want to purchase it themselves?
Most physicians that work with therapists specifically after a procedure, usually they give it 3 days for all the sutures to take and make sure that the patient is completely stabilized from the procedure and make sure there's nothing crazy going on.
Right.
After 3 days, totally safe to gradually work cycles into it. There is another approach as well where my last surgery was a knee replacement. I'm an orthopedic mess, man. But my rehab and recovery at the VA here in Tampa, instead of putting Kaatsu on the affected leg where I had the surgery, the next morning they wanted me to use it on my upper body.
Right.
Because there is that systemic effect that we talked about earlier. So great way to, and this gets to some of that cardiac rehab model with Dr. Nakajima. But yes, I used it on my arms for those 2 or 3 days until we were sure everything down on that knee looked good. And then we were able to shift to gradual cycles on the knee. And then, of course, I had my own units at home, so it was no problem.
So what I'm gathering is typically it's just a short-term treatment for rehab, but it's always best to have one at home so you can continue it. And it's probably and it's definitely worthwhile for anyone like myself to use this on a regular basis just to enhance, my health, my endothelial flexibility, I should say.
Yeah, anything you can do to improve or increase vascular health and elasticity is a good thing. And actually, now that we're talking about elasticity, given what you do with your practice, I can push you some of this information offline. But there is a program in Japan called Kaatsu Beauty, and what they do is it's fully focused on skin and skin health. So they'll, and it's like 95% ladies, maybe 100%, I don't know. But it's the ladies go in, they put the Kaatsu bands on their legs and they run through cycles. And during the pressure on phase, there's lotions and massages
Oh,
that they
wow.
do all through the neck and in the face and whatnot.
Interesting.
I don't know that much about it, but logically it makes sense, right? If the heart is going to be pushing a lot harder with every time, you're going to get that benefit everywhere, anywhere there's capillaries, which, you know,
So
is there.
basically, you're increasing blood flow and oxygenation of tissues in this process. I mean, and that's sort of why some people like hyperbaric oxygen or ozone therapy, these kinds of things to really help with that. Well,
Yeah.
this is great.
I'll send you a study that shows the subcutaneous blood flow improving on the forehead during Kaatsu cycles on the legs. I'll push that to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, John, I really want to thank you on so many different levels. Once again, thanking you for the service and protecting our country, but also, protecting our health now with, this kind of technology that people can get access to. It is affordable. I mean, it's not exactly inexpensive, but it's certainly affordable. And certainly, finding a physician or a PT clinic that will help. Once again, my purpose with these kinds of interviews is to really display all sorts of products out there that can definitely help with health optimization. There's not always just one answer to everything. Oftentimes we're so focused on, okay, we'll just take one pill or just do one surgery or one kind of exercise and it should be enough. And it's never the case. It's really, in your world, right? Take a small team and working together in alignment, with one common goal or mission to get the results. And for rehab and health optimization, this would be one of those.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate you having me on your show.
Thank you. I appreciate that too. Thank you, John.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Dr. Rademacher's Prescription for Your Transformation. Continue the path towards discovering your own authentic genius by tuning in next time for more real conversations with real people.